Welcome, welcome, welcome. It's always a pleasure. I love well, they're now beautiful sunny spring evenings. The sun is setting later and later, and I trust you've had a fabulous day, that you're staying safe, that you're staying well. You know, on these evenings, Tuesdays and Thursdays, we talk to real people about real life. And what's great about these people is that they've had their own journeys, their own challenges, their own opportunities, and now they're coming back and they are sharing some of their secrets, if you like. How did they make it to the top of the mountain? Maybe they're not at the top, but they're pretty high up it. And that's what we talk about, isn't it? We talk about climbing Kilimanjaro. We talk about these training sessions, a little bit like we talk about your internship, and we say that's going to be climbing Kilimanjaro. You're not just going to turn up on the day. You're going to be all set. You're going to have your head in the right place. You're going to have the right kit. You're going to know what you're talking about. That's why we run these training sessions. And so we talk to these interesting people and we ask them pretty much the same questions, which is, tell us your story. Tell us how you made it. How did you get up the mountain? What mistakes did you make? What things did you do right? What have you learned? What would you like to tell yourself, your younger self? Anyway, these are all the sorts of things that we're going to be talking about to my guest this evening. And we have some special guests. You all know that. We get some pretty big beasts on the show, but this evening, they don't come any bigger than our guest. And let me tell you a little bit about him. Lord Dr. Michael Hastings of Scarisbrick, CBE. He's had an illustrious career across the public, private, and non-profit sector. So the whole lot. It doesn't matter whether you're talking public, private, or the charity sector. He's done it all. Working with in education, philanthropy, and business, he's supported and developed communities literally around the world. I know whenever I try to get hold of him, he's on a plane somewhere. He's in Africa. He's in America. He currently serves as the Chancellor of Regent's University London and as Professor of Leadership at the Stephen Covey Institute at the University of Utah. And Stephen Covey, that name will ring a bell. A lot of you will have read his book. So he is also a vice president at UNICEF UK and a trustee for the Africa Philanthropy Foundation. Lord Hastings is the former head of public affairs at the BBC, and he was their first head of corporate social responsibility. So we talk about CSR. Lord Hastings was there right at the very start. He also served as the global head of citizenship for KPMG, and is a former trustee of the Vodafone Group Foundation and subsequently a governor of the Vodafone Safaricom M-Pesa Academy in Nairobi for 800 of Kenya's poorest children. Lord Hastings began his career as a teacher, and then he worked across government agencies on policies to build racial equality, workforce development, and safer and more effective crime prevention strategies. He was conferred with a doctorate in civil law from the University of Kent at Canterbury in 2014, for recognition of his leadership at KPMG, at the BBC, and for his work in international development and corporate responsibility. And in 2019, he was the first ever recipient of the Stephen R. Covey Leadership Award for a life built on principles and pragmatic delivery. Lord Hastings, welcome, welcome. We're absolutely delighted that you've joined us. Thank you very much indeed.
Well, thank you. I'm honored to be with you, David. It's a joy.
Absolutely, absolutely brilliant. Look, I'd love to know a little bit about your background, about your journey. You're in the House of Lords. You've done so much, and you have your fingers in so many pies. I don't know how you get it all done. It's absolutely incredible. But just share with us a little bit about your journey, your background. Where did it all start? And yeah, I mean, we'd be here all day if you told us everything. But just give us a flavor.
So imagine two boys, my brother and I, born in England, but then went to Jamaica in 1966 with our father and our mother. My father was a dental surgeon. My mother was trained as a nurse, but never worked formally. And my father was taking forward his private practice in dentistry in Montego Bay, Jamaica. And there we were, awaiting possibilities of living there forever until there was a major cataclysmic election event that turned Jamaica into a pro-Cuban supporting and therefore pro-USSR supporting small country, which threatened America. And before we knew where we were, the country had gone into economic turmoil, into violence, into severities of drug abuse. And both my brother and I were forced out, as it were. Our parents said, you have to go and become boarders in a school in England. So off we set in 1972. My brother, extremely bright, was going to do maths at Oxford, which is what he wanted to do, and then go on into an academic life, which is what he's always had, at MIT, Massachusetts Institute of Technology in the US. I, on the other hand, wanted to study theology. And as far as my dear parents were concerned, that was a total waste of time. And they assigned me to the corner saying nothing would ever come of my life because I was choosing something that nobody really cared about and wasn't going to lead me to any decent profession. So being where I am in so many ways and going through all the different professional roles that I've been gifted to enjoy has happened not because I've had the ability to do any of them, but because I've been willing to do one very simple thing. Well, two very simple things. One is I've been willing to try my hand. Show me an opportunity, an open door. I'll try my hand. I won't say it's impossible. I'll say, let's give it a go. And the second thing is I've never believed in limitations, never believed in limitations. And it's always a matter of saying, if I'm not the right person for it, let me try and become the better person for it so that I can rise beyond my limitations. And I encourage everyone to do exactly the same. So that's the story of my life. I've never applied for any of the roles that I've been given, not a single one of them, never applied and asked for any of the honors that I've been given, all the honorary degrees that I've been given, all the positions I've been given. They've all come by invitation. And I suppose the quick summary of what these last years, now at 63 and started work effectively at 21, what has been the story of my life has been relationships, where people have known me and I've known them. And as a result of those positive, meaningful relationships, invitations come.
Absolutely extraordinary. I love the fact that you've not sought any of the honors and the titles that you've got. They've all been bestowed upon you. But speaking of honors and titles, you're in the House of Lords, for goodness sake. What's that like? What's it like to be in the House of Lords? You all hear, I mean, just tell us a little bit about, what's it like in there?
Well, the first thing is very few of us in the House of Lords use the full title available to us. So here is the full title available to me, which is the Right Honourable Baron, the Lord Hastings of Scarisbrick, Commander of Her Majesty's Most Noble Order of the British Empire. Now that's the way we're announced at events in the House of Lords. Normally we wander around and we call each other my lord or noble member, or sometimes by first names. It is an exquisite experience to be in. You're talking about an establishment that tracks back to nearly 600 years and in a building that is well over 350 years old in some parts of it, and up to 1,000 years old in other parts of it. And the privilege of being there is to leverage what we've been given as volunteers. And it's so important to say this, that apart from the ministers of the government who are in the House of Lords and the officials, the rest of us are volunteers. We aren't paid. We don't get a salary. It's not a job. We receive expenses for our time when present, but we don't receive any remuneration. And so we give our experience and insight and commitment and passion so that we can move things in the needle of hope towards a better service of the public.
So look, what I'd love to do is just get into a couple of things you're involved in at the moment. So the Stephen Covey Institute, all of that, I'd love to hear a little bit about. It's the Leadership Center. And what are you doing there? I took a look at the website, and you talk about it's the World Principled Leaders series that you're involved in, and then you've got this title which I love. I absolutely love this, ladies and gentlemen. You want to listen to this because this is going to inspire you. Dare Mighty Things. Tell us a bit about that, please.
Well, Stephen R. Covey, who wrote the great book, The 7 Habits of Highly Effective People, and then the other book he wrote, which of course was The 8th Habit, and the 8th Habit was all about going from effectiveness to greatness. He was just a master of crafting in very simple terms those principles that we need to grab. And if we live by straightforward, simple, critical principles and never abandon them or change them unduly, then remarkable things can happen around us, through us, to us, and because of us. And so I get the joy of every week teaching a group of students, but also we open up what we do through YouTube to all 35,000 students in the whole university. So we're sharing with everybody these interviews that we do with significant world leaders. We've had everyone from Muhammad Yunus, who created the Grameen Bank, right the way through to David Beasley, who was a former governor in South Carolina and now leads the World Food Program. Both of them Nobel Prize winners. We had them both on the same day. Paul Polman, the former chief executive of Unilever, a great man with huge vision for what ought to be a decent world. This afternoon, in preparation for this week's session, I've interviewed the 62nd chaplain of the US Senate, Chaplain Dr. Barry Black, the first ever African-American to occupy that position. We've had so many people, women and men, who have just applied principles. In other words, the values they stand for, the things that are distinct about them are the ideals they hold on to, irrespective of the tough and the challenging times they've had to go through in business or in public life. And we're engaging our students in that inspiration. And, you know, one of the things I just find so bone-chillingly good about it every single week is that instead of having a group of students that you kind of have to chide to come on to Zoom, you know, get them on for what is for them a 9 o'clock in the morning start on a Friday. They're there early and they're so keen. And these 2 hours go like a zip because the sense of excitement that they're learning things which are absolutely eternal and significant. These are permanent insights. And I'll just give you my favorite one, because of the 7 habits of highly effective people, my favorite one is number 2, which is begin with the end in mind. Have clearly in the depth of our inner being an awareness of where we're heading and plan for it, but don't overwhelm it. Instead, walk towards it and combine wisdom and faith alongside perception and understanding.
Look, this is getting very powerful because so my business partner, Robert Gardner, who's been on here, he says this a lot. Begin with the end in mind. It is incredibly, incredibly powerful. And it would be crazy to have you on here and not unpack some of these principles. So I love that. Begin with the end in mind. And maybe we can, by the way, if you've got questions, ladies and gentlemen, put them in the Q&A. I see Winnie's already put something in there, but start throwing your questions in because this is, you're not going to get another chance to ask Lord Hastings these kinds of questions. So I just would love to just draw out some of the things that you've learned from some of these guests that you've spoken to. I mean, could you just land with us some of the principles, some of the values, some of the wisdom perhaps that you've in the last couple of months, maybe anything that springs to mind that you'd say, you know, that would be something I'd like to share with these guys.
Well, here's something from Captain Chaplain Barry Black, the chaplain of the US Senate. He was the one, by the way, if you were watching on the turbulent day of the 6th of January when the US Capitol was stormed and there was an attempt to take over the democracy and the institutions of the United States government, he was the one who at 4 o'clock in the morning had to wrap it all up once Mike Pence, the then vice president, had sealed the deal on what gave the new president the clarification of his vote. It was Captain Barry Black, Chaplain Black, who sealed it up at 4 o'clock. He's an amazing man of significance and permanence. Been there nearly 20 years and 27 years before that in the US Navy as an admiral. I mean, just a brilliant man. He said this, really most important point. We asked him, what would you tell our students is the most important thing they need to learn from you? And he said, make sure that the inside is radiant. The inside of who you are is radiant with life and dignity, integrity, and purpose. Whatever you look like on the outside will fascinate the few. But the truth is, on the inside, that is who comes out in the reality of the life you must live.
That's very, very powerful. Let's unpack that a little bit because that's something that I think you personally also aspire to. What are your values? What's your purpose? What gets you out of bed? It's a question that we sometimes ask our guests, but what is at the beating heart of it all? What is it for you that drives you?
So I was asked, I really love this question always, Dad, because I love to tell where it came from and what it is. I was asked at the age of 16 by my very dear friend who was also 16 at school, who said to me, what are you going to do with your life? What's the point of your life going to be? And this came out of my mouth. I think it had to have come from that deep within because I hadn't rehearsed it, but here it came and I haven't changed it since 16 to 63. It's exactly the same. And I say it every single week to myself and a multitude of others. I want to speak for the poor. I want to speak for the poor. I want to bend the power of the prosperous towards the potential of the poor. I'm deeply conscious, having been brought up in a chaotic economic and political environment where I saw deprivation head on and significant violence in the streets head on, I realized what poverty does as a child, and I couldn't escape it. And I've never been able to escape the burden of fighting for those who are on the edge of life.
Yeah, and I know that you do that. I mean, you and I have done some work together at Swaleside Prison, for example. Let's talk about that, actually. Why don't we do that? And just for a couple of minutes, maybe tell the guests, the viewers, what happens at Swaleside Prison. It's an extraordinary project there, and I've worked there, you've worked there. Let's just talk about that a little bit.
So I've been going now for 5 years, every 2 months, with one of my older sons. Even during the course of lockdown last year, when prison visits were not allowed, we had an exception, and we continue to visit and to meet with those who are in our relationship care. We're volunteers. We're not an organization. We call ourselves My Brother's Keeper. We have a bank account to which people give in order to support the inmates with books and learning courses and programs and sportswear. But basically, we've never been paid and never had a single penny of expenses. And what we have done over 5 years, and you came in on a couple of occasions with us, what we've done over those 5 years is to work now with around 120 men, as the numbers have grown over the years, and to treasure them. These are all men who are serving long, complex life sentences,
yep.
Meaning, somewhere between 20 to 38 years. And it's obvious what they've done, so there's no point needing to go into that. And we just choose to have hope with them that they can be bigger and better men than what they ever were. And you did a wonderful thing, Dawood. You came in and you taught so many of them about communication, about speaking, about confidence, about gripping the reality of the voice that's within them and releasing it outwards. And what we do every single session is we help them to understand that there is going to come a day, when they step into the light of freedom. And not only will we be there with them at that day, we will persist in supporting them till that day, and then helping them over the hurdle into whatever comes next. Not every man will make a good fist of that. We know that. Complex psychological and personal realities will intrude, and we can't do anything about that. But those who have abundant hope will keep at it every Sunday morning, without fail, at 7:30 in the morning. A man who is serving 28 years for taking the life of a family member calls me. He's allowed to. My number is imprinted into the system. He phones, we speak for half an hour every Sunday without fail. It has been a treat to help him grow into a sense of beauty, knowing that he has 12 more years to go.
Yeah.
And I'm looking forward to those calls.
I've met him. I've spent time with him and with people like him. And I've got to say, it's probably been one of the most purposeful things I've ever done to work with those men and to help them find their voice.
That's it.
Enable them to stand up. And some of them have never told their story. And so we did some work around how do you tell your story? And I've seen men break down. These are big, these are tough guys. I mean, these are guys who are tough. And I've seen them with tears flowing down their faces, talking maybe for the first time about where they're at, and what their hopes and aspirations are. And you keep coming up each time as someone who has done some extraordinary things. And I suppose what I'd love to do is just delve a little bit, because everyone watching this will get the sense as they listen to you talk that here is someone who has principles, who has values, who has direction, who has integrity, all those things you talked about. And we'll want to learn from you about maybe the key attributes that you think have made you, on any view, hugely successful. And success, by the way, isn't just about having a huge amount of money in your bank account, candidly. I mean, it's not. So for you, as you look at success, I mean, what is success? Let's start with that, and then let's look at what you need to be successful. What for you is it?
I really believe in the view that success is improving a condition that needed a bit of time. Stepping into a social disorder, a business that needs to step forward, a set of lives that require confidence, helping people to make steps into the future. I think it would be fair to say that Our world is absolutely full of people with regrets and with fear because of regrets. And sometimes those are legitimate. But you know what we can never do is re-own yesterday, but we can grab tomorrow. And I do believe in helping people to see where tomorrow may be and step towards it. Have the faith and confidence to step towards it. And I've seen the radiant light of God's favor in my life, which doesn't mean the material blessings or positions, but it does mean the chance to make a small difference in a significant way. One of the stories I love so very deeply, you can look it up on YouTube if anyone wants to, which is the story of the man who planted a tree every day for 37 years. And it's the story of this amazing guy in an island in the northeast of India. And the island had become completely flattened out as a result of deforestation and also a certain amount of climate abuse. And this guy decided at the age of 18 that he would plant a tree every single day without fail, getting on his knees, planting a tree. Now it is a forest 10 times the size of Hyde Park in London, twice the size of Central Park in New York, all because he just kept serving on his knees to plant a sapling. And these small acts are powerful transformative realities when we persevere. And that's one of the most important things I've learned: patience and perseverance. Martin Luther King said, you know, when you're reflecting on the realities of the need for justice, to the long arc of history ultimately bends towards justice. No matter how despaired we are that things are far from ideal, and especially on those issues of race equality or inequality, far from ideal, we are better than where we were. And we must continue in that persistence of improving people's conditions and fighting against complacency and speaking up for those who are on the edges all the time. But as long as we keep on that, all the progresses we've seen in our world of massive reductions of extreme poverty and hunger, although let's be candid, and you know this, David, in the last year, because of the refocus on the belly button of Western life, we've allowed the destitute and the poor to shoot up again. And that's a tragedy. It's a tragedy. And people have lost big elements of their generosity. They've been hiding behind their doors and fearing for themselves. And I really believe in the need to continue to show light from within. And for me, that light has come from my faith. It has come from my conviction as I follow Jesus, that I know what I want to be like because I can see what he was like and what he is like. And I see how his hand touches into the complex places that are painful. You know, it's a wonderful thing when you look at the story of Jesus in the New Testament, in the Bible, and they kind of once said, well, where is he? We want to find where Jesus is. And they said, you'll find him with the drunks and the prostitutes and the vagrants and the homeless. And that's where I believe we need to be, as alongside society's brokenness. And therefore, as healers, not by some metaphysical method, but simply because taking the sap of the oil of gladness and gifting it from one to the other.
That's a really powerful picture of success. I love the fact that you're in the House of Lords. You are on the face of it at the very top of the triangle. You're at the pinnacle, and yet here you are talking about the poor and the oppressed and the downtrodden. And I've seen you in working with people who candidly society has no time for. If you're locked up for 38 years for something that you did, your society literally has no time for you and says, yeah, lock them up and throw away the key. And I see you in there. So I love that definition of success that you provide, making a difference, and something that you don't count in monetary terms at all. But what do you think you need to be successful, however one defines it? What are the ingredients of success as people watching this are reflecting on an entire life before them? These are ladies and gentlemen in their early 20s. What does it take to be successful, do you think? What are those things that you need? I know you talked about an inner radiance. For you, people who are successful, what are the attributes you would say that you see in them?
Having a deeply well thought through sense of purpose. That is incredibly important. I mean, according to one of the biggest ever surveys ever done in the last 10 years, asking questions in over 140 countries in the world about people's sense of purpose, what it basically revealed, and this is the horrendous fact, it basically revealed that only around 18% of people worldwide know why they're here. And if we don't know why we're here, then we don't know what we should do and how we should live. We get blown by the winds of whether it's opportunity or disarray. So having a deep sense of purpose is immensely important. And I'm going to give you a quote from someone whose purposefulness I adored, George Bernard Shaw, who was writing between 1856 and 1950. He said this: "This is the true joy in life, being used for a purpose recognized by yourself as a mighty one. The being a force of nature instead of a feverish, selfish little clod of ailments and grievances, complaining that the world will not devote itself to making you happy. I'm of the opinion," he said, "my life belongs to the whole community. And as long as I live, it's my privilege to do for it whatever I can. I want to be thoroughly used up when I die. For the harder I work, the more I live. I rejoice in life," he said, "for its own sake. Life is no brief candle for me. It's a sort of splendid torch, which I've got hold of for the moment, and I want to make it burn as brightly as possible before passing it on to another generation." Deep sense of purpose is really important. Deep sense of awareness is vitally important. We need to see the world for how the world is and is going. I'm entirely excited by history, but I'm captivated by the excitement of how our world is transforming, watching economies spiral over one another. There was a day when we in Great Britain were #1, and no more. We're around 6 or 7 right now, but the time is going to come not too far away when we even drop out of the 10. And other countries that we've looked on with a sense of, they're going up there: Indonesia, Turkey, Egypt, India. So important. This isn't just a tussle between America and China. This is a world transformation moment in the course of the next 10 to 15 years. So world awareness is really important, being intelligent about the reality of the world around us. Deep purpose, intelligence, and world awareness. And and the third one, which is so absolutely vital, you can never, ever, ever, ever push this one to the bottom, because it's not. Radiant, persistent compassion. We just saw literally a week ago the death of Bernie Madoff in the prison cell in which he was doing over 120 years for phenomenal fraud. What a tragedy. What a tragedy. A Ponzi scheme that destroyed so many people's assets and killed off what little they may have had or what lot they thought they were going to get. And we've seen endless stories of that nature. Unhappy, a family that fell apart, people who committed suicide, lives that were shattered for greed. And greed is the conversation even in the news today between what will some Premier League clubs do or otherwise. Because of what? The dingling dangling of the gains that can be made. But the important thing about primary sport is who it involves, not the gains that are made by the cashier who is hidden and out of view. So that deep necessary compassion, that means we choose priorities that don't give us advance in the eyes of the limited numbers, but glory in the eyes of God, that he sees what is done with a generous and fearsome heart, humbly and persistently.
Yeah, that's extraordinarily strong and powerful. And ladies and gentlemen, if you're watching this, you should really be taking notes on this, because this is the sort of thing that I wish someone had told me when I was in my early 20s. I was interested in, I wanted to work hard, and I did, and I wanted to get promoted, and I did, and I wanted to be able to pay my mortgage, and I could, and I wanted a good job, and all those sorts of things. And I did do all that, but I just wish someone had maybe sat me down and told me to just take the bigger perspective a little bit, because I think what can happen is you get caught up in the race and in the rat race and in the competition against everyone else. And you do have to be great, and you have to be good, and you have to be you have to stand out, and you have to be a self-starter, and you have to have all the habits. But ultimately, it's not about you. It's actually about everyone else. That's the point. I mean, I think when you get that, it's not about me, it's about everyone else. And if you can live that kind of a life in which you are kind and you are generous and you are good. And by the way, this cohort that we are talking to here, we want to be the best prepared cohort that we've ever had coming into the city in just a few weeks' time, actually, in June and July of this year. What I think would gladden my heart more than anything is if at the end of it, not necessarily that people said, you know what, these were the smartest guys, or even these were the hardest working guys, or even these were the greatest self-starters we've seen. All of that would be amazing. But what would be fantastic would be if they said, of these ladies and gentlemen who are all about to show up, you know, they had real character, they had integrity, there was something radiant about them.
Yes.
That would be an extraordinary thing.
Yes. All of these amazing young men and women that you've got working with you, hopefully this summer, many of them will be back in offices, in teams physically, and certainly by the end of the year. And so many of them will have the opportunity to arrive at a station somewhere and then walk towards a city place, Canary Wharf, or wherever it's in Mayfair, or it's right in the heart of the city of London. You know, if you stand on the end of Waterloo Bridge every day, or you stand on the edges of Tower Bridge every day, and I've done it deliberately just to watch, 95% of people's heads are down. I don't want us to begin our day like that. I want to look up. You know, there's nothing quite like gratitude in the soul for the simple things. That means we enter our work not with the distress of having to get through it, but with the honor of what we can learn. A constant attitude of teach me more, teach me more, teach me what I don't know. You know, I've qualified with whatever I've qualified with, and that's wonderful. But what I don't know is the greatest chasm that is the empty space between my ears. And if I can fill that day in, day out by gentleness, generosity, and genuine pursuit, then I'm really maturing as a human being. Yeah. So I just hope every one of your guys and girls will lift their eyes up.
Yeah, absolutely. Joy. I'm going to take a few questions because they're flying in. And by the way, ladies and gentlemen, if you've got questions, do put them in there, and do also put your comments into the chat. But we've got some questions about relationships, and because we talk a lot about social capital, and we talk about the business of needing, you know, it's good if you know people and if people trust you to be trustworthy. Yeah. All those sorts of things. You talk a little bit about relationships and have they played a role? I know they have. I mean, I know you know everybody, and I know there's no one more connected. In fact, didn't you have Michael B. Jordan? Were you hanging out with him at some point?
Yes, and Jamie Foxx. I had them together hanging out.
Okay, yeah, let's just shut that in the mix. And Jamie Foxx, as you do. So, where do you go from there? Just tell us a little bit about relationships, relationship making, and what does it take to be trustworthy and to have relationships, good relationships? Lots of them.
Well, there's a very old French person called Lockhart, who was a philosopher and a scientist. And he came up with the principle that we now call forensic science, which is the idea that everywhere you and I go, we leave a trace of ourselves. We leave it physically, we leave it emotionally, we leave it personally, we leave it relationally. There's something of ourselves that is deposited on all those that we are around. I was taught as a young man by wonderful mentors, and this is way before, I mean, I had no information about having any titles or positions. As far as I was concerned, I was going to be a teacher, and that I'd be lucky if I managed to be anything more than a teacher. That was it. Being a teacher was amazing, and I greatly did it. But I had no perception of all of this world I now occupy. What I was taught was this: when you can, as much as you can, hear and heed all who come your way. To give the time to listen. One of the sweetest parts of a politician's biography is what is written of John Major, the Prime Minister who followed Margaret Thatcher. And the night the votes were being cast in May 1997, when he was clearly going to lose to Tony Blair, it is recorded by all who saw it that one of the cleaners in 10 Downing Street, who just suffered the loss of a very close family friend through a death, and the word got to the Prime Minister that this woman had lost her close family friend, but had come in to clean, that was her duty. He took her into the cabinet room and sat with her for hours as she poured out the story of this close relative, and the tears flowed down her face, and he held her hand. You see, some people would have been sweating about the loss that was just about to happen. But giving time to hear people, heed them, that'll teach us everything.
Yeah, yeah, that is extremely powerful. Let me have a. So there's a question. Paul has a question about the quote. I think it was the George Bernard Shaw quote, and he just says, "What was that book from, please?" He's interested in that. So I don't know if you can tell us where you got that quote from.
A little thing called Google.
A little thing called Google. Brilliant. Okay, we've heard of that. We know about that. Okay, and there's a question here around mentorship and role models. So you didn't make it to the top of the mountain by yourself. You presumably stand on the shoulders of giants. You presumably had mentors. You've had people who have inspired you, that you've looked up to. Can you tell us a little bit about any of those people? Is there anyone that you could say, yeah, you know, that person played a massive role in my life? Wasn't for him or her, I wouldn't be here now.
There are many, truly, and thankfully, some of the older ones are still alive. I mean, well into their 80s now, but still alive. But one who isn't sadly still alive, and just because this is a wonderful story, and you can look him up again through Google, Major General Sir John Nelson, KVCO, and then a string of things after his name. And he had been a British Army general in the Second World War, responsible uniquely for leading the British Army campaign against the Nazis who'd crossed over the Mediterranean into North Africa. Not many people realize that the Germans then were after the conquest into Middle Africa of multiple countries. It wasn't just Europe, it was to be Africa as well. And dear John Nelson, this sturdy, medium-sized man, charged with the task of leading tank infantries and soldiers who would drive the Germans back across the Mediterranean. He would spend time with me every 4 to 6 weeks. We'd spend a few hours together. He became head of the International Student Center, which is just near Marylebone. And I would sit with him in his office, and he would convey wisdom to me from when I was 19 years old until I got to being around 30 when he finally passed away. And one of the things he told me was so interesting, I'd never forget this, was when you've got literally tens of thousands of men across the desert, and how are you going to communicate to those men about when to move? You don't have any satellite systems, they didn't exist. You don't have a radio system which you can use in the desert, it doesn't work there. You've got no signaling system. How are you going to do this? And he said, you know what we discovered? Because honor and heeding and listening and truth-telling was so vital, that we taught men to listen to whispers and pass them on from one to the other, one to the other. Move now, all left, head 2 paces back. Whispers, whispers, whispers. They would go down like, that's how we won the war. And I learned from that, not just the importance of those close relationships where people will hear and transfer rather than hear and add to, hear and gossip from, hear and destroy, but hear and transfer, but also how vital it is to give attention to whispers.
Yeah, and if you've got a close relationship, then the person you take it from takes it as it is, as it comes, and then passes it on as it arrived, without embellishing it or without taking anything away from it.
That's right.
Really powerful. That is extremely powerful. Let's talk a little bit about race, because this is a 10,000 Black interns program, and we're having lots of conversations at the moment about what it means to be someone who isn't white, and specifically someone who is Black, in what is essentially a white ecosystem, or an ecosystem that certainly isn't Black. And you are in one of those places that is, on any view, the House of Lords is rarefied atmosphere. This is a place where there are not a lot of Black peers, and yet you've made it, you're successful, and you've navigated, it now for almost 20 years. So these are people who are now watching this, who are coming into an environment that I think some of them are a bit fearful of, and just say, how am I going to avoid imposter syndrome? How am I going to emerge victorious? How can I be myself and be authentic? And let me just throw that to you. How have you managed to navigate a world where presumably many, many times you found yourself as the only person who's Black in the room? And how have you navigated that? And did you ever have imposter syndrome, or did you turn up and think, yeah, this is my, oh yeah, this is made for me?
I've never believed in imposter syndrome. I know it's a reality. But the reason I never believe in it is because, or I never have held it as a belief to myself, is because I am convinced that with the right caliber of character, people of any kind will open their hands to you. And I've been able to see that. I never forget being, as an 18-year-old young Black boy, asked to go to a meeting in London that was of high elite establishment figures, all white, 30 of them round a table, one young Black boy from the north of England. I was asked to go by the headmaster of the school that I had been boarding at. I had no idea what I was doing there, other than he said, could you take notes for me and come back? And because I was in London, and I did. I didn't feel intimidated or threatened, because I went there with a mindset that said, how can I learn? What can I learn? And who can I meet? And I've always stepped into everything with who's an interesting person I can give a bit of time and attention to, and that's a person I want to hear from. And also, one of the things that John Nelson said to me when I was in my young years was, he said to me, always ask questions. Don't assume that people are keen on who you are. Why don't you be keen on them? And if you're keen on them, you open doors that draw others close to you. So although I've had multiple experiences of being misunderstood racially, taunted racially, accused racially, I've never put myself in the victim box. I'm, as you know, Dawid, furiously angry about the fact that if you're a young Black man in London, you're 9 times more likely to be stopped and searched by the Metropolitan Police, where in reality, 83% of all the searches, according to Home Office data, result in no questionable behavior. So the vast majority are harassed and frustrated. I'm furious about the fact that there are 1,980 Black men in prison on what are called indeterminate prison sentences. Sentences brought in, I have to say, under Tony Blair's prime ministership, cancelled by David Cameron's prime ministership, but they never set free the people who were living under those sentences. Means that if a man's given 7 years and he misbehaves in year 6, he's in for another 5. And if he keeps on misbehaving because he's frustrated, he's in for another time. And some men have done 20 years when they had a 7-year sentence. I'm furious about that. And this particularly affects people who are Black or of a different ethnic hue. I'm furious about the fact that if you're a young man in court, and I'm literally supporting a young man in court right now, literally in the course of, it's a 4-week sentence. I won't say who it is, but a prominent young person who's in court right now. And the prospects of the more harsh sentence are a factor of 7 to 1. I mean, these things are institutional injustices, and they have me wound up with fury. But I know, having worked on the Commission for Racial Equality for 9 years, having fought and campaigned on so many of these things, we need allies who are going to walk this journey of transformation and change with us. so that they can see what we see is instant, they'll see as horrific. And then they'll join us to change it.
And let me close by asking you this. Do you think change is coming for the rest of this decade? Do you think that from the perspective of race and just in the way we are viewed as people who are not white, do you think change is coming, or do you think this conversation carries on and we're all awaiting the George Floyd verdict, the verdict on Derek Chauvin for the murder of George Floyd? We'll see what happens. I mean, they could come back at any moment. But do you think we are in a time of change? Are you positive about the coming years?
Well, I've always been an optimist, I've always been an optimist, irrespective of the darkness that pervades around us. Yes, we are all waiting for what can only be, I hope, the most just outcome, which is to recognize the absolutely discriminating violence that took place against an innocent man, irrespective of his own limitations. That was gross and unacceptable. And we've seen too many patterned, similar attacks on young men, even in the course of the last week in the United States. And we have our own cases here in the UK. I hope that justice is served and that this begins to see the seismic change that is necessary. Yes, I'm optimistic because the world is horrified in a way we were never horrified before, partly because we never saw these things face up, and phones and the internet have allowed us, the tragedy of being able to see it, but also because, with all the limitations of the world that we occupy, which is so centered on the self, there is still a wonderful instinct. I'm on the board of an annual attendee and speaker at One Young World, and every year we get around 2,000 20 to 35-year-olds together. This year it's going to be in Munich in Germany, and we're teaching these really important principles about success in life by understanding the context in which we live. I'm thrilled. They come from 140 countries, and I'm just thrilled by seeing the compassionate wisdom that they pursue and the issues that they take up and the fights that they have and all the rings of networks that we've created now around the world in the course of the last 10 years. So I am optimistic, massively optimistic. And I do believe that no matter how tough this is going to be, as long as you, Dawit, and I don't give up. Here is another little bit of a poem just for the last few minutes that we've got together by Samuel Ullman, quoted by Douglas MacArthur, General Douglas MacArthur. He said this: "Youth is not a time of life. It is a state of mind. It's not a matter of tender cheeks and red lips and supple knees. It's a matter of the will, a quality of the imagination, a vigor of the emotions. It's the freshness of deep springs of life. Youth means a temperamental predominance of courage over timidity, of the appetite for adventure over the love of ease. This often can exist in a person of 60 more than a body of 20. Nobody grows old by the number of years. We grow old when we desert our ideals."
Absolutely brilliant. Thank you very much indeed. Listen, our time has gone. There were a ton of questions that I wish we could have got to, but I know you've got to run. I know you're super busy, and I just want to thank you for sparing your time. It's huge. It's really, really big, and continue to do what you do. It's such a blessing to hang around with you, and to that trip to Swaleside Prison when you first invited me, which I feel now is almost 3 years ago, just an extraordinary thing. And shout out, by the way, to Richard, who I think is no longer there, but was just an ordinary guy, right?
Wonderful man
Who just decided, I need to make a difference here, stood up and just, I think he invited you in because he knew someone else there, and just shows, doesn't it, what one person who just says, I'm going to make a difference, and stands up, and then look at he brought you in, and you brought me in, and you brought in a lot of different people into the mix. So powerful. So thank you so much. Maybe we'll have you back again at some point later in the year. But yeah, absolutely brilliant. Thank you. All blessings. Stay safe. Stay well.
Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, see you on Thursday, 5 o'clock. We've got another great guest, and we've got a lot more top tips. So we'll see you soon. Take care.
Bye-bye.